Hello and welcome to this week's, or in fact this fortnight's Madaxeman.com podcast. We've of course got the regular team of 7 in possibly one of the sweatiest days of the year, all dialing in by Zoom for this week's chit chat. We do the normal stuff, there's a bit of painting, there's a reasonable amount of gaming. Honestly, no one can be bothered with painting, it is just too bloody hot, and we've got new rules to play, so we want to get out and gaming again. There's also the welcome return of I'm Sorry I Think You're an Arse as we look at the Achaemenid Persians, and in a feature which was completely accidental and unplanned, but makes us feel almost like a proper podcast, we discussed the vexed question, when did you come out as a wargamer and how did it work at work? So sit back, pin back your ears and enjoy this week's podcast.
This means war.
Well, look, welcome to the sweatiest day of the year, which with 7 wargamers staring at each other on a screen, all indoors, as we sit here on a Wednesday evening, I believe, and the temperature is now probably still pushing north of 25 or something. So it feels like in London. That's great black t-shirt weather, isn't it? Those sweat stains, I can see them kind of leaking from it. Although Peter, you look like you're actually wearing a proper shirt, or possibly just the collar. I can only see your collar there. It's a little bit Harry Hill.
Shirt front, you know, I just thought I'd get dressed up for this momentous occasion of, getting back to going wargaming. It's just really makes you feel up for the games and everything.
Yeah,
else.
no, that turning up in a 3-piece suit is like a real big thing, isn't it? Because
it gets you in the mind for it. You know, sitting back in t-shirts and shorts and that, it just doesn't really make the dice roll well.
No, it really works. You know, with the badger hair, it's just and the Docklands bit behind you. You know, I'm getting big kind of multinational Russian mafia villain vibes from you.
I am actually casual because I haven't got the cufflinks on today.
Well, look, you know, maybe no cufflinks.
What you're missing, Peter, is the bow tie not actually tied up but hanging down one side.
I think
that's in the pocket.
Yeah. Andy, you don't want to be asking Peter about what's hanging down one side. That's not really the way that this works, I don't think. Certainly not on a very sweaty evening like this.
Yes,
one.
I heard about that trip to Spain. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes. So look, I was going to say without further ado, but we've kind of worked out that almost no one's done any painting really, because it's been so bloody hot, and we've actually been running out and playing games and taking advantage of the ability to actually physically meet people face to face. So I guess from a painting perspective, I suspect it's Adam, you're unpacking some figures, which is kind of halfway there. That's a little almost pseudo painting. You're doing that quite furiously as we speak. Dare we interrupt you and ask what the hell they are? How have you come by some figures by magic?
My next door neighbour has got a son who's now about 15, and he said, "Do you want a big box of toy soldiers?" I went, "Yeah, all right then." And
you were thinking what, Airfix or something like that? Was that what you're expecting?
Well, it's like I just said yes because I thought it would be a surprise.
Yeah.
And it turns out that his son at some point in the past was into Lord of the Rings, so I've got a big box of Lord of the Rings figures, and there's a range of different ones, and they're not the best stuck together, but and some are broken, but there's loads in there that can be salvaged. So if I get around to painting them, because if you remember in the first lockdown thing, I was talking about painting some Lord of the Ring figures that I'd had lying around
like
for ages.
Episode 50 ago or something like that, wasn't
it? And there are quite a lot of the bloody baskets actually, which is nice.
So would it have been a set, or was there a big set of those? Anybody remember?
I'm guessing it was like the starter shirt set.
Yeah.
With some other stuff as well.
Yeah.
Bought on
that
top.
Was sort of when GW went a little bit off the rails, wasn't it? They their share price kind of tanked for a bit after I think they paid too much money to
they've still done.
Well, I think the sales for Lord of the Rings really went well for a couple of years, and then the film sort of like slipped out of consciousness and it went down. But I think that was the same time where Games Workshop decided that they weren't going to be a games company anymore, but they're actually a manufacturing company. So they put sort of like loads of stuff into sort of like making figures, but didn't really sell games. And I think that's because recently they've sort of like got back into doing actual games and rules and stuff, and it's they're doing a lot better now for it, which is nice.
Okay, all right. So what do you there's two questions here then. What are you going to do with all these Lord of the Rings figures, and how do you feel that your neighbour has said, my 15-year-old son has now grown out of this, I've identified you as the person who will be interested in taking them off my hands?
Well, it's the second question. I remember having a conversation, it might have been when I was doing one of the rants, where I said that I don't want wargaming to become popular. I quite like it being a bit weird and being one of the bit weird ones, and sort of like the blokes that I go down a pub with kind of know I play toy soldiers, and I've mentioned it and they've shown absolutely no interest whatsoever because they're like proper normal people.
Yeah.
So they kind of know. So you went, toy soldiers, no. It's like, yeah, Adam will probably have them.
So you basically outed yourself.
Yeah, it's again, it's like I have very little to talk about with my life in general. So I've got to sort of like have some sort of like interest. Or something I must admit, vaguely interesting about me.
When I was gainfully employed, there was kind of a time, and I suspect it was. I'm trying to think whether it was when geekiness became more acceptable, which was probably about 7 to 10 years ago, that it became something that you could kind of admit, or it started becoming something. Or it might have been that I just got more important than work.
Time the Big Bang Theory started being
possibly, yeah. God, that's still bloody going on, isn't it? Yeah. But do any of the rest of you remember a time when it started to feel acceptable to tell people what you do in your private life?
Well, I think I think part of it's to do with the fact that we're now supposed to be all inclusive and be nice to people who are on the spectrum, and probably people we deal with think, oh, he's probably somewhere on the spectrum, which is why he does this stuff. So let's pretend let's not take against him for that reason.
The only thing I've got a problem with on that is the use the word probably.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I just didn't want to tar everyone with the brush of being as weird as most of us.
I think if you're looking at the listenership for this podcast,
I'm fairly safe ground, you reckon? Yeah.
I think we're pretty safe. So really, your theory, Andy, then is it became acceptable to admit that you were playing toy soldiers when society started to realise that picking on people with mental health issues was just morally and mentally completely wrong.
Yeah, when that became uncool.
Okay, uncool. Yeah. Right. Okay, that's it.
I've always had no qualms until when people I play with toy soldiers, because it's like, what of you,
Yeah, but Simon, your follow-up is, now let me tell you about IT, and they go, no, please tell me about toy soldiers instead.
Or even better, I can tell them all the joys of being a vegetarian or things like that, and all of a sudden wargaming is the least weird thing. So
I like that. You sort of like trumpet it by even worse,
It's always funny telling that while I'm cooking them a steak, just to really make everyone think a vegetarian.
What's going on with that?
Steak. Yeah.
So yours was basically when the IT crowd became widely known and people started to have to force to be interacting with the IT guys in the basement, and you just you walked in with a big bucket of weirdness, just inherently because of Richard Ayoade and then that Irish lad he married, Dawn Porter, Chris O'Dowd. There he is.
Yeah. Yes, when you walk into the office for the first time carrying a miniature box, right, and everyone just goes, "What the hell are you carrying?" Well, here's a box of toy soldiers.
I still think it's fun when we do international competitions and we're going through the X-ray machine and they open it up and they all go, "Oh, that's nice," and they call about 5 other people come along and actually have a look at it and start playing with it, and they go, "That's pretty cool."
Peter, there is a reason that we let you go through first as well. You've not noticed that in 8 years. It's always Pete, you go first.
It's when the super glue sets off the explosive sniffer as well. That's always the funniest one, which actually made my kids laugh a couple of times.
So it's really a question of that. When did you come out as a wargamer?
Yes, that's essentially what we're saying, isn't it? Really, Dave, have you admitted it? You're a man with a new job.
I've never had any shame whatsoever in carrying toy soldiers into work. I've always shown them to people, and it's never been an issue as far as I'm concerned.
How many jobs have you had in the last few years? Is it no?
How many jobs? The last 10, 3 different leading jobs.
Oh, that's all right then. That's not too bad.
I think it's also a lot better to say, "Here are my toy soldiers." If you carry them into work and you show people go, "Yeah, all right." Whereas if you just say you play with toy soldiers without having them on you, people think, "Oh, that's weird."
I'll tell you where you get respect from people when they say, did you buy them painted? And you say, no, I painted them. And then they suddenly think you're a person of some talent in some respect.
Yeah.
So Tamsin, you must be the most respected person amongst us.
I was going to say, when I show them mine.
I used to take figures into work to paint during my lunch break. So
that's even
well,
more
just round of applause. That's like all in, isn't it? That's just
one step beyond.
All the cards on the table. That's fantastic.
What I find weirder is when you're in the office, you say, "Yeah, I play games with toy soldiers," and other people go, "Yeah, my husband does that as well." And they're the ones who are coming out of the closet.
Yeah. Yes.
And when you're talking to clients down the phone, you go, "Yeah, actually, I'm spending this weekend at Warfare in Reading." And somebody very high up in the organisation says, "Actually, my husband's going there to play fantasy." Go, but we play a proper game. We play historical games.
Oh, of course, yeah. That's part of it, though, isn't it? Yeah, that historical hierarchy, isn't it? Of we do have someone to look down on.
The snobbery
fantasy.
I look down on him because he plays fantasy.
Both science fiction gamers. So
I don't know. Science fiction.
I remember years ago going to Leeds. And we were booking into the hotel, and the B&B lady was sort of like, "Oh, what are you doing in Leeds for the weekend?" And we said, "Oh, visiting friends and stuff." And she said, "Oh, that's good, because like some people, they're going to that weird thing up at the university." And we were like, "What weird thing?" And she said, "Oh, there's some Star Trek convention on." And we were like, "Oh no, not us. We're football and stuff, lass."
Yes. Yes. But that was back in the day. We have all moved on from that, haven't we? Really, I suppose that is the great thing.
Well, with the Birmingham event, the
Games Expo.
Games Expo.
Yeah.
I've actually bumped into people at work there because that's an absolute massive thing and covers such a wide gambit. And the Wargames bit is actually the smallest bit there. It's hilarious going up. Seeing all the diverse.
Those Star Wars kit. That costs a bloody fortune. That does. I mean, you could get quite a few ADLG armies for what you spend on enough kit to play Star Wars game. I think.
No, I guess so. No, I think it. Maybe it is. Tamsin, you said it was sort of around about when the Big Bang Theory was on, and it became cool. All these superhero movies, and although I do still have a suspicion it might have coincided when I became like a bit more important at work, and I could tell people, and if they reacted badly, I could just fire them, which just made it a lot easier as well. And everybody seemed to think it was fantastically interesting after that. After the first couple got pushed out of the third floor window.
I seem to remember when I started wargaming seriously about 10 years ago, you said to me you were rather concerned about being caught going through an airport with some sort of Wargames trophy.
Oh God, remember that? Yes. Oh, what a nightmare. Yes, that's true. That was true. Yeah. We got some gopping great trophy. It's probably behind me somewhere up.
The one in Italy.
You can actually see it on the camera. Yeah. It's that enormous one sort of up there.
The white and plastic gold one. Oh, I thought we left it in Italy. Because I remember sitting in the bar and we were looking at it going, "Nah, you're right, you take it, mate." And I thought we just left it.
What year it was. Maybe it was Italy, but
2009.
2009, so that's 13 years ago, isn't it?
It was the year that I arrived in the UK when I flew to London, then came down to Rome, and easyJet lost my luggage. So it's 44 degrees in the castle, and I'm wearing a winter suit from Australia.
You were wearing a winter suit from Australia, and I was your first opponent. You said, "I'm moving to London. Do you know anybody?" And I said, "Well, kind of, yeah." It's like, here we go.
I think you 25 zipped me in an hour and a half.
Yeah, but I think you just weren't ready at the races. You would never mind the clothing sort of thing. It was Comedy Australian stuff. So I got that gopping great trophy for being. In fact, I am still European Fog Champion because they've never run that event again. So I'm the reigning European Fog Champion. And
are you sure that's not the UEFA Champions League trophy? It looks a bit like it.
Yeah, no, that's it's. I do live in London, not Manchester, so it could be, couldn't it? But I think it was this gopping great trophy, and then in the airport lounge, there was like somebody I knew from a previous job, and we're kind of like, I can't really avoid admitting why I'm here because I'm carrying this trophy that was about 2 foot long and would barely fit in hand luggage. So I think that was when I was sort of forced to admit it, but definitely, that was a nightmare story. God,
So they didn't wave a Union Jack out the front of the plane for you as you landed at Heathrow?
No.
A welcoming committee.
No, there wasn't a central London flag at that time. So we weren't able to get special diplomatic treatment for it.
They didn't paint down the side of the flame. Down the side of the plane. It smacks of incompetence.
It smacks of incompetence. Yeah, down the end of the. No, I think it would have been
really something you want on a plane, Dave. It's just it takes it one step too far.
That would have been the
not Ryanair.
There was probably an Italian translation because Mr. Van Tol, our Central London resident linguistics expert, translated our club motto of "It smacks of incompetence" into about 20 different languages. So we went on an international tour with "It smacks of incompetence" in about 20 different languages down the back. And because he's like Mr. Language, isn't he? He when you reverse translated them, they were all kind of local idiomized. And I'm pretty sure one of them, when you translated it back to English, said, "You are surrounded by the stench of incompetence." You're permanently surrounded by the stench of incompetence, which is
that's the better than the war competition at BritCon, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing. I will tell you about my trip a bit later on, but it sounds like we've digressed there, so it's probably time for a musical interlude.
This means war.
We started talking about painting a long time ago. So, Tamsin, I think it's me and you are the only people, other than Adam stripping some figures, has done some. So, what have you?
I painted two figures.
Andy, you painted two. I'm not even sure we're going to count on that. We'll just go straight to looking at Tamsin's.
They were 10 mil, so they don't really count.
Two 10 mil figures in a fortnight. That's more embarrassing than admitting you're a wargamer. So, Tamsin, talk us through these. Please tell me you bought these trees, not homemade them.
Or what?
They are bought trees. They're cheap trees, which for various bits, i.e., from eBay and Amazon.
Are these the ones from China?
I tarted them up. So cheap trees from China. But I've done
these are the palm trees that you see.
These are palm trees.
Are they cake decorations or are they sold as trees for railways and things?
People sold them as both. They get listed as both on eBay.
Right. Okay.
Have you put herbs on them?
Not on these. Not on
yet.
Is that one of the Maldive Islands disappearing beneath the waves?
It could be.
So how much? Because these trees are plastic, aren't they? I've certainly the palm tree ones. I've looked at them many times.
Palm trees. Yeah, they're plastic. So initially you get them, and had to clean up the mold lines on the trunks.
Yeah.
Then I gave them a thin down coat of acrylic frame sealant, just to.
Your special ingredient for everything.
As a sort of, but just give a little bit of texture, hides residual mold lines, and also.
So is that like when you get when you get Airfix soldiers and you do them in a thin washed down coat of PVA? Is that the same principle?
Same principle, yeah.
Okay.
Also, it toughens it up and it provides a good surface for paint behind. The fronds were just hit with acrylic spray paints.
So because these things come in. The leaves are plastic green, but sort of a shiny cheap plastic.
Yeah. And
the trunks are shiny cheap plastic brown. So you gave them a clear acrylic thing, or did you then spray paint them?
It was brown frame sealant.
Oh, okay.
Brown frame sealant, just thinned down a bit. Thanks. I had brown frame sealant. Label.
Okay.
Then I was paint and dry brush on top to get various tones.
So this that we're looking at here, then, because what we can see is the green fronds on top of the palm trees, and then the brown trunks. So you painted those brown trunks. That's not just a dry brush on the original color. That's
not just brush. That's painted.
Excuse me. So the whole thing was sprayed green, which we can see here, and then you painted the trunks
fronds
brown.
You can't really see the ones you're saying now. They're for bottle palms. I think sago palms. I think.
Okay.
And so those are sort of a brown trunk bits, but it's short trunks for those.
Yeah. That's Yeah, that's interesting because I've looked at those and thought they are going to look cheap and plasticky, but then the idea of painting them
a little bit of
always
work.
put me off.
I mean,
but
you could just use plastic primer and then paint a dry brush over that.
Yeah. Okay.
But
and then these are the other trees that I can see that you get from China.
Trees, because jungles aren't just palm trees.
Yeah.
These were also sort of cheap China.
Yeah.
Cheap
from China.
From China that.
And are these ones with?
I tarted up a bit. So went over, sealed on the existing flock, then added a bit better flock of my own, and then sprinkled with Gauge Master scenic leaves.
Right. So because the ones I got years ago, the in inverted commas flock that was on the branches was actually plastic. It was like really tiny little plastic shavings, and they were horrible. You got ones with more flock.
I've seen those, but I've been able to avoid.
Yeah, I'd avoid them because it just falls off.
They were all originally sort of coarse foam flock.
Right. Okay, that's better then. And then you've added more and leaves and other things, but you have sprayed it to fix it.
Yeah, amazing. So sealed everything in, so they're quite solid. Nothing's coming off.
They're absolutely amazing.
They're really much better.
And I've also been making clump foliage.
Oh, brilliant! I knew there'd be something completely insane because we were just like thinking you bought Chinese stuff and you've just given it a dry brush, but no, you've made your own clump foliage.
That looks like you've been growing certain herbal plant.
Yeah. How have you been making it? Yeah. Should you be admitting this on a podcast?
I have been making my own clump foliage. Yeah.
Right. So how do you do that?
Rip up foam sponges. So you could rip off the foam from kitchen scourers or the big car washing sponges.
Yeah.
Just cut that up into chunks. Put it through a blender with some water.
Oh, sorry. Time out. No. You're not getting past that. You put it in a blender.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Then
you live on your own, don't you?
Break it down in smaller bits. Then add some sort of paint and a bit of PVA
in the blender.
No, do that separately.
Don't be crazy. Don't be crazy.
What speed?
If it's your home, if it's your kitchen, your home blender, and you have other people that rely that
use it, maybe not.
Do not put paint in the blender.
No. Is it your bedside blender? Are we going back into the world of Victrix? You're going back into world of Victrix. You have a kitchen blender and a bedside blender.
Yeah,
it's like their airbrush, right? Okay.
Yeah. So.
Wow. I can't remember seeing this on doing this.
That big bag there is from 2 car washing sponges.
Yeah.
So that's about 66p. Add on about £1 for paint and glue.
Yep.
Those 3 bags by the side, which in combined are about a quarter of the amount, cost £6.
£6. So you got 24 quid's worth of stuff for about £1.60. That's all it costs you.
But how many trees do you need?
Is this going to replace the Amazon forest?
This is not just going to be for trees. It's going to be. This is for sort of the bigger clump stuff. It's going to be for sort of underbrush, underscrub.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, okay, I can see the £1.20 cost versus the £24 cost, but the idea of me using a blender to chop up car sponges, I think that would end up costing me quite a lot more than that. In lost limbs and physical injuries.
If you're going to be doing a lot of it, buy a blender for 15 quid I saw in George at home.
Now, Tamsin,
did you research that? Brilliant.
Research and testing on the blender? Because I know you did this with some of your paint mixers and other things. So was there like a selection criteria on which blender, like a size, volume, longevity, power and all that?
I think there should be a huge...
Go for something cheap. Go for something as cheap as possible with decent amount of power. with a reasonable amount of power, so it's
I got
Dave,
to
a
do
decent
YouTube
amount of power to cut through the foam without it burning out.
Dave, I am you're so right. My YouTube channel, I'm just thinking, I've not put anything on it for ages.
We're going to have a
mock test of blenders with a comedy voiceover. So I think this blender may be the best one for creating mid-European foliage from the 5th century to the 9th century. It could be the new thing. It could be better than my F-35 video.
Tim, if you had one of these brown coats and you could do the Kenny Everett Reg Prentice character voice.
I'm not
the guy who used to DIY and was always going.
What was it? Was it a fast show today? I'm mostly going to be.
Today I'll mostly be blending sponges. Fine. Well,
and started on some test bases for the jungle scenery. So early stages. Just added sort of herb mix to all.
No.
Edges of the bases.
Did you put that for the blender? Did you have to blend the herb mix?
No, I did not have
to use a pestle and mortar for that, Andy. Come on, you must know. You're calling us from a kitchen. You've got all the equipment around you.
Yeah.
So is that Italian mixed herb or French mixed herbs?
I can't remember, to be honest.
Well, look, I'm just grateful you didn't make a conscious decision between the two, depending on the theatre of war, which you're trying to simulate, to be honest, based on where we're at. Wow.
It was a big bag of mixed herbs, and also added, I think it was about a jar of thyme and a jar of rosemary to it.
No, it's good. Well, scratch and sniff terrain. I think it's the future.
No, tarragon and rosemary, not.
No.
Thyme would have been ridiculous.
Middle East, does that mean you have to start using fenric,
sumac and stuff like that? Yeah.
No, my flat smells of fenric since I've had my flatmate moving. That's another story.
Oh. Okay, yeah, that's a different podcast though, Dave, I suspect. Really. Right. Okay. So Tamsin, so you've done a week of herbal terrain blending then, which I think
lots of playing with lots of colours of green paint.
Yeah, it's true. I think Adam, that kind of puts you in the shade, I'm afraid. I'm just being given some stuff, but
I wasn't really listening to that because I was busy sort of sorting through my toys, and all I had at the end was doing terrain blending, which I think Tamsin wins that.
Yeah, no, that's easily
win. Should be blending a special Mirkwood Elven Forest this week.
Dave, I don't want to know anything about your Elven Mirkwood Forest. It's a part of you I never want to discover, but I just feel kind of woefully inadequate to say that I've actually been painting some 15mm figures in the last fortnight. I've got some little Zeiston Egyptian Marines that I got a load more of. They seem to have developed different shields from the last lot I bought about 7 years ago, so they're slightly different. They're all mixed in, but it's weird when you blend them in. But when you're trying to paint stuff up that matches stuff that you did a long time ago, it's just like that weird thing that have I still got the same colors? Am I going to get this just right? Or can I do this?
Can I remember what color I used?
And then, was it at that era at which I was just dunking everything in Army Paint to strong tone, so it doesn't really matter because all the colors get washed out? Or was it post that and I actually have to do some work? So I think they just about blended pretty properly, but I need to get, I've still not tested any with the matte varnish. And done that, and then I've just been doing a lot more of Clive sorting out type stuff, going through the collection. I've now, as we speak, I've got 52 different things on eBay, because trying to work through the concept of getting the big armies which are coherent that can be sold to people we know and all the rest of it. And then the theory was to pass the other stuff that people at the club didn't want onto one of the traders, the Heinz figures or whatever. But I rang up the guy at Heinz, and not Heinz, the beans place, Heinz, and he said that he's not really interested in taking the Flames of War stuff because he picks up a lot of collections of people who passed away, and he's just picked up more than 3.25 tons of World War II 15mm from someone, which sounds like quite a lot. And he said, he knows
that's just showing off.
He said he knows it's more than 3.25 tons because he hired a bloke in a van to go collect it from this late guy's house, and the van bloke rang him up and said, "My van's overloaded, Ian, and it's a 3.25 ton van." So somebody has passed away, sadly, with 3.25 tons of Flames of War stuff. Which means,
was it painted?
I'm guessing so. Maybe that means a few hundredweight was paint or something, and maybe they were the metal originals rather than the resin mid-range or the plastic ones. Could be anything.
But you ought to tell Clive's family about that. Might make them feel better about the amount of stuff that Clive actually left behind.
Yes, no, I will do. And then I got into Shed 2 as well, which was exciting, and I started making a bit of a dent on that. But it's been an interesting project on that front. But,
you're talking about 3/4 ton of World War II stuff. Do you think the person who had that collection, were they trying to recreate World War II 1:1 scale in 15mm? Sorry, 1:100 scale.
I just imagine they never used it. They absolutely never used it. It's the more I look at it, the more it convinces me to keep my own collection very well organised and start to sell it at some point as well. So there's not quite so much of it left, which is kind of nuts. But yeah, so I think that starts to unless Andy, you can fill 10-15 minutes talking to us about these 3 10mm figures that you painted. Any interest in it, or
no, really, no,
a bit of a bish bosh? No, fine. Well, we'll do a terrible disservice to 10mm then, and we will skip on to our next section, which is coming up shortly.
This means war.
Okay, then. Well, look, having done the painting and a discussion about admitting that you're a wargamer and coming out and all that kind of stuff, that's looking at the past, and that's looking at some of the more colourful armies in history as well, which is a dreadfully half-hearted segue to say that it must be time, after a few weeks of missing, for an episode of I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse. Coming up next on Madaxeman Radio, it's I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse, the antidote to informed discussion shows. At the piano this week is Scott Joplin, and your chairman is Sir Humphrey Humphreyson. Hello and welcome everybody to this week's edition of I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse. You join us this week from the Edmund Ironside Grand View Concert Hall in the rural market town of Old Sodbury in Gloucestershire. Located here in the heart of England, visitors who climb to the top of a nearby hill are greeted with a view covering 7 different counties. And on a clear day, it is said you can sometimes even catch a sight of Birmingham off in the distance, despite the many prominent warning signs advising against this. So, this week on I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse, I'm in the chair, and partly this is some of the stuff that I've been going through and trying to find and trying to cobble together some of the eclectic different batches of soldiers from Clive's collection. And there keeps cropping up all sorts of people who could be or might be or maybe or could be some sort of Persians. And just because I keep coming across odd units and I've still yet to find a coherent army to kind of collate them all into, it's got me thinking just how bloody irritating the Achaemenid Persian army is as just an entire concept, and whether it's just a waste of complete everybody's time to even have the Achaemenid Persians in the wargaming canon. Because if you think the Achaemenid Persians, it was a massive empire, 500 BC to 329 BC, which so Middle East, Asia Minor, Thrace, it went into the Black Sea, it was into Afghanistan, India, Iran, an enormous theatre of operation. They fought the Greeks, they must have fought the Indians, they must have fought the Babylonians, everything. And in every set of War Games rules ever, this huge, biggest empire the world's ever seen, covers all the rest of it, has 2 lists, an early and a late. Doesn't even get a middle. nothing changes. And the two lists are, other than the Spara Bara type people are dressed slightly differently and they've got apples in one of them, the two lists are pretty much the same anyway. So suddenly you've got this enormous empire that only gets two lists a bit hopeless. And what is this empire famous for? Why does it deserve a place in history? Its greatest, most famous things are: it failed to invade Greece by land, it failed to invade Greece by sea, it lost 3 battles in about a fortnight to Alexander the Great, the first person who actually tried to invade them, and then they ran away like a dog and killed their own empire or emperor. And you're like, that's not really the mark of a massive army that everybody should want to build and recreate. Why does anybody want to create this 200 years of anonymity and utter failure? Their most famous tactic: stand behind a garden fence that you brought along with you for the purpose. And this standing behind a garden fence tactic, what kind of idiots were they fighting when they were expanding the empire? Because we're going to stand behind a garden fence and shoot you appears to have allowed them to crush, the whole of Asia Minor into India and up the Black Sea, all that sort of stuff. Oh, they've turned up with a fence. We'd better give up. And then this great tactic that's expanded their huge empire, the Greeks turn up and go, well, should we just run at them and punch them in the face with a stick? And that's it. And it's over. Bosh. The whole empire winning tactic is just completely finished. And, you look at it, you think that was always going to be rubbish. It was a wicker fence. They didn't even concrete in the posts in between them. They didn't even stick any posts in. It was just freestanding. It was always going to go down. Elementary mistake. Anybody who's got a back garden will know that you've got to concrete in the posts if you want it to survive. And, the army composition of your classic Achaemenid Persian armies, this huge empire, it's famous for dragging in all these amazing, fantastic, colourful troops from around it. There's the Persians themselves, the Medes, the Indians, the Aracosians, the Bactrians. There's Guardsmen, Scythians, Syrians, Medians, Mesopotamians, Parthians, Tupurians, Hyrcanians, Caucasians, Albanians, Cappadocians, Armenians. And what are they? They're medium cavalry with crap bows, and they're infantry with crap bows, and they're all wearing pajamas. Every single country they conquered, everybody they put together, basically provided them with 2 troop types. If you're really going out, on a limb, you might have a bit of a bloke with a javelin just for shits and giggles, but it's just bowmen in a floppy hat, all of these different nations. What a waste. They've got an empire that reaches all the way to India. They've got relations with India. They probably dominate parts of it. They can pick up any troops that they want. What do they come back with? We look at that list. We'll have the mediocre cavalry and we'll have the bowmen, please. You're going, for God's sake, bloody elephants, possibly the chariots as well, but take the bloody elephants. And all the Persian armies throughout this history, their best troops are always that you end up having to have mercenary hoplites, which is basically Greeks fighting in a style of warfare that was already history by the time Alexander came to it. And the Persians are going, oh, they've already lost to Alexander. We'll have a load of them. That'll be fantastic. That'll be the core of our army. They're not Greek. We've got the biggest empire in the world. We can pick from anyone in the world. We'll hire somebody who's actually invading us right now. See if we got to get them on that. And, I suppose there are the few toys. Cyrus, the country and Western singing emperor, he gets all sorts of things, but, he gets the towers, he gets the whatever they are, the camels disguised as malarkey. Such brilliant ideas that in 2,500 years of subsequent military history, no one ever copied them ever. Why do you design an ancient troop type which can only realistically be used on a concrete paved road? That's just bloody nonsense, isn't it? And camels disguised as elephants. What was he thinking? It's like every set of rules ever written has the same -1 for elephants and camels. It makes no bloody difference if you disguise camels as elephants or you just put them there as camels. It still gives a -1 to opposing horsemen. Was he just hoping that someone would come out with a set of rules that included the line, these factors are cumulative? It was like just nonsense, because just for that one troop type, we give him -2. And the whole core of the army, other than those, was the immortals, of which there was always 1,000. So who is going to sign up for a unit that is fundamentally based on the implicit assumption that they will suffer casualties every battle? The individual soldier has no value. It's just the unit that counts. If you die, we'll replace you and we'll pretend that you were never here. It's like, how do you get recruiting people into that? That's not the message you want to sound. And, you look at it, Thermopylae, Greatest battle? Well, let's pick a road into Greece that's so narrow it can be blocked by 300 blokes. Take a week to try and find a detour. And you win the battle and you end up not being as famous as the people who lost. What a hapless empire. Granicus, I'll get me cavalry to defend a riverbank. Come on. Issus, I'll stick my mercenaries in the middle of the army. Okay, they're the same nationality as the people we're fighting and not really as good, but that's going to work really well. Gaugamela, nobody even knows. That's just famous for running away. It's just complete bloody nonsense. And then this army of nonsense bowmen and nonsense people behind the fence gets replaced by the Parthians, who have learnt how to turn all the crap cavalry into good ones. And they cause trouble for Rome for hundreds of years with a totally different type of army. Soup heavy, cataphracts, light horse archers. They can take on the Roman legions, the biggest empire in the world, the toughest, best army ever seen. They can go toe to toe to them for ages. And that's the Parthians sitting in the same thing. And then the Parthians get replaced by another empire that springs up in exactly the same place. And it takes the best bit of the Parthians. It takes the cataphracts, it takes the horse archery, and it picks the crappiest bits of the Persian army, hopeless spearmen with sticks and some poor quality bowmen. And they go, well, we picked a bit of the Parthians. They fought Rome. We got all their good stuff. We picked the shit bit of the Persian Empire. Let's call ourselves the Persians again then. What nonsense is that? Why didn't they call themselves the Sassanid Parthians? Why don't they model themselves on the winners in this history rather than the losers? So all in all, and this is even before we got to the fact that no one can actually spell Achaemenid because there's too many A's and E's and they're all in the wrong order and it's a bloody nonsense word. So we've got an empire that should have the pick of the best troops in the world, but manages to pick crap ones. It's got unmitigated history of defeat. There's no backstory about how it actually came to conquer this huge empire. That's never told in the history books. It's just all about how they get punched in the face by the Greeks, how they get punched in the face by Alexander, how they then turn on their own leader and punch him in the face, and then get punched in the face by the Parthians. It's just utter nonsense. They're great military innovations, were never copied by anybody, and were completely insane. There's not even a middle army. There's only early and late. So I think for all those reasons, my theory is the Achaemenids, just a bloody waste of time, despite how nice the Zeiston figures are, all unusable. Nobody should ever really be using it. And that, I rest my case.
Tim,
yes.
Do you have an Achaemenid Persian army?
Well, I've got bits and bobs, but they're probably used for something else. Well, yes, I do. Yeah, to be fair. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So,
I can't really go with that one very much, but I'm looking at it thinking it's going to be rubbish.
I zoned you out from the start. You shot yourself in the foot. They're very pretty to paint. Sorry, you're an arse. You're already failed.
You're just in on that one.
They look pretty. And
there are pretty armies that are good, though, aren't they? And have got some sort of historical record of being good. But it's just the Persians seem to put all their effort into kind of the sartorial aspect of combat and nothing into the actual fighting bit.
But it's the sort of army where you can rock up and you go, if I win anything, it's going to be good. But it's the crazy dog one where you're turning up with like in ADLG,
well, you're turning up with
like
with bog standard bowmen. You're turning up with bog standard bowmen. That's what you're turning up with. That's the meat and two veg of it.
No, but you can have a right old mix of stuff.
But they're all bowmen, Peter. Were you not listening?
Tim, the reason they didn't pick elephants is because the elephants would have squashed the fences.
Yes, yeah, the fences were.
Elephants out. Having wicker fences.
That's better off with a nice shrubbery.
Yeah, having wicker fences and elephants. No, the elephants would have eaten the shrubbery. And the other thing is,
Tamsin, also, you can't now put shrubbery into every army just because you've got your own blender. That's not going to happen.
The Teutonic Knights have got the shrubbery. The Teutonic Knights got the shrubbery. But there's another thing, Tim, about disguising the camels as elephants, right? Because Cyrus knew from the ADLG rules that elephants cause panic on camels, not the other way around. So if he turned up with things looking like elephants, the enemy's camels would be panicked. Otherwise, they wouldn't be.
I think
you check the factors on the QRS.
Right. Okay.
Elephants trump camels.
I'll probably ask someone on the internet.
on a purely pronunciation basis, the Achaemenid Empire is now called the Achaemenid Empire.
The what?
Achaemenid? It's no longer the Achaemenid Empire. It's now the Achaemenid Empire.
You're talking out of your Uranus, mate.
Bloody true. I was listening to In Our Time and they kept going on about the Achaemenid Empire. I was like, what the effing hell's that?
Well, I think that's building up, in favour of me, because now, it's 2,500 years ago and people not only can't spell it, but they can't pronounce it. What's the point in that one? Unmitigated, history of defeat. Can't even spell itself or pronounce itself. Nonsense, really.
I would query about the history of defeat. I mean, after they won at Thermopylae, they went and set fire to Athens and burnt the Acropolis. I mean, that's not the sign of defeat.
No, but then they went home, didn't they? I'm not seeing a big Persian culture based on Athens.
They beat the Egyptians.
It's bad press, that's all.
They beat the Egyptians.
Yeah, but the Egyptians were a load of bowmen with towels on their heads.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, bowmen with towels on their heads and a fence are going to beat bowmen. That's just the way it works, isn't it?
So Tim, with the sort of like the Thermopylae Greece thing, when the Persians turned up, went into Greece, burnt down Athens, went home again. Have you read in the Greek books where the Greeks were saying, "Yeah, we won"?
Well, the Greeks are kind of, I'm not seeing that there's a great continuation of Persian history in the Peloponnese, is there really? They didn't put down any roots. They just went in and went home.
They stuck around.
Yeah, they didn't want it.
It's lovely though, isn't it? The salads are great and stuff, and the grilled meat's lovely.
Stuck around until Plataea, didn't they? And when the Spartans and everybody else got together and kicked them out.
Yeah,
whatever his name is.
Well, that's a minor detail, Dave. If you're saying there's some actual history to say that they did actually occupy it for a long time, but they were still beaten in the end, weren't they?
Well, I'd actually go further, saying in historical terms, it's the transition period between the biblical era of warfare into the Greek Hellenistic form of warfare. And the interesting fact is the Persians basically showed up in lots and lots of troops and said, give up. And everybody did give up. And so they showed up and said, give us salt and whatever. And everybody surrendered. So they weren't actually used to actually fighting anybody until the Greeks actually said, no, we'll actually have a fight actually instead.
So my theory about defence is actually true.
Like the colourful uniforms, basically, is what you're telling me.
So it was a bit sort of like, biblical warfare was just show up with lots of people and everybody sort of surrenders. And then all these Greeks turn around and go, no, we'll have a punch up instead.
So you're saying it's a perfect army if you are playing a very specific type of war game that basically whoever turns up with the most figures wins the game.
Exactly.
And you don't actually roll any dice or anything.
Unless you go to Scythia and then you lose.
Oh, okay, just because that's where the competitions are. And they start playing then. So... But again, I'm still saying that's an army that is designed not to fight then, which sort of feels like you're agreeing with me. But
or is that Scythia or Scythia?
Scythia. Scythia. All right.
Chimerians or the Cimmerians or whatever.
Yes, the Cimmerians. Well, look, with time cracking on, I think I will sit here in the centre of the screen and go around and ask you for the do you support the proposition or do you have the different buttock-based view? So let's start with Mr. Finkel. What's your 2 or 3 word response to the proposition the Achaemenid Persians should be wiped out from wargaming history?
I'm sorry, I think you're an arse.
Okay. Tamsin, what about you?
I'm sorry, I think you're an arse. So you've got to have somebody for the Greeks to beat up.
Yes, but that's... You just want to put some shrubbery in there instead of the fence, don't you? Saunders, what about you and your funny pronunciation?
Arse.
Arse. Millie Ray Mayer?
Arse.
Adam?
On the one hand, I kind of agree with you because for doing war games for decades, I keep thinking, I should do in that Achaemenid Persian army. And then I just think, I can't be asked, which kind of sort of like backs up the point. But on the other hand, everything you've said just sounds like sort of like cultural snobbery and sort of like, because it's not sort of like Western and you can't be bothered to research it properly, I mean, you're not going to do it. So, but
isn't that cultural snobbery a fundamental part of wargaming? That's just an implicit assumption in everything we do, pretty much.
Well, no, it depends. I think the Persians suffer from it because the Chinese used to.
Aren't you the man who is, as we speak, painting up some Perry Longbowmen?
Well, some Swiss pikey things, yeah.
Okay, Swiss pikemen and Perry Longbowmen. There we go then. Yeah, okay. So I sorry, I shouldn't interrupt. Tell me what you think.
So it's a tough one because it's like I've never been Yeah, no, I'll actually go with you. It's sort of like it looks pretty if you can be bothered, but you've got to paint thousands of the bastards, and they're quite difficult and hard to paint. So I'll go with you on this one. Actually, I'm sorry. Peter. I think you're not an arse.
Okay, and Peter, finally for you.
I think you're an arse. They're a pretty army, and I'm gonna actually build one out just to beat you with it, just to prove the point. You know,
I'll bring my Persian army about.
Just to roll over you with a lot of crappy mixed sword bow. You know?
I'll bring my Persian army out, and we can see who's just got the most troops.
We can out Persian armies. You know, lots of flowing robes and no naked flames nearby because they'll all go up in a puff of smoke.
Absolutely. All right. Well, look, that's a surprisingly close 5-1 defeat, and on that basis, I think it's time to definitely move on. Well, as the Barkery sentence construction of time hits the English language of destiny, I see that that's all we've got time for on this week's episode. So we'll see you next week on I'm Sorry, I Think You're an Arse. Well, look, with the sound of small villages in England receding quickly into the distance, let's have a run round and see in the last couple of weeks, as we've not been doing no painting, we've been doing some gaming to mostly, I guess, give these new ADLG rules a bit of a run out. And if we kind of do a bit of a round robin, say, what games have you done and what kind of stuff, the particular focus on what kind of stuff have you picked up, smelt, felt, learnt about the rules and in the last couple of weeks. So I don't know, Andy, starting with you, I'm guessing there's some Dave Rayage action, but have you started playing in V4 yet?
Oh, yes, we did. We've done 2 games in V4. The last one was Palmyrans against Romans, so I couldn't have any Roman troops in my Palmyran army, which made it a bit challenging. And to make it even more challenging, I had one allied general and one subordinate unreliable general, and I rolled 1 for both of them on the first turn. So the game went from let's try and win the game to can I avoid losing it in 7 turns, which was an interesting dynamic. I didn't quite succeed, but it took him to 7 turns to take me down. But the thing I learned was that I was trying to send cataphracts forward to smack his line, but there was a bit of terrain on the side, and I felt that if I didn't hold that terrain or cover it, I'd get hit in the flank by people beating up my cataphracts. And because my guys went hesitant, I couldn't get anyone to move forward to cover the terrain. So that meant that I couldn't send the cataphracts in until late in the game, and by then things had gone a bit pear-shaped. Once they went in, they were seriously dangerous, and I think cataphracts now fighting frontally are horribly dangerous to most things in the game.
Okay.
Been telling everybody this for weeks.
Okay. So Dave, have you been just throwing cataphracts at people then, if you're saying that for weeks?
I'm refusing to use cataphracts.
They're too good for you already.
Since
you had 2 of them.
What?
You had 2 of them the other night.
Apart from when you played me.
Well,
yeah, and
I've
me.
used 2 in a Roman army. I think that's quite responsible cataphract use, I think.
Yeah, but deploying them in the field isn't.
They weren't elite, they were just ordinary.
So you're saying you're not addicted, you were just testing the waters?
Well, I'm not using Tibetans, and I'm not using Parthians, and I'm not using Palmyrans, and I'm not using etc. No, I've actually lost track of how many games. I'm actually sitting here with a pen thinking, how many games have I played in the last 2 weeks? Well, I think it may be 8 games.
Wow! Oh my God! Has that been down at the club then?
No. Well, I played a couple of 4 at the club, I think. 2, I went to Mike Bennett's house, very nice in Rotherhithe.
Yeah.
He had a very nice cottage pie, even though he's on a low carb diet. I played with the Byzantines, the Maurician Byzantines, with a half and half, the half lancer, half bow. And we immediately forgot that they were actually shooting at 1 level below.
Oh, forgetting the rules is such an easy thing to do, isn't it?
So
it really is.
Byzantines slaughtered, heavily outnumbered. I think I had 21 against 27 Arab conquest medium cavalry impact, and totally blew them away.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So what was it that gave? Did your magical bolt shooters do any good, or
No, not in the Maurician Byzantine.
Oh, sorry, not the Maurician. Okay.
No, but my Romans should have beaten his Sassanids. I caught his 5 Sassanid heavy cavalry bow evaded, and I immediately threw a 6 to his 1 and hit them up the jacks.
Yeah, that finishes that quite quickly then, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but didn't quite manage to win that game. Lost to Gordon using Ottomans against feudal Polish.
Feudal Polish, wow. How are the Ottomans? Because that's a bow. Oh no, that was a bow sword army before, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was 3 Janissaries. I used the stupid. I used, was it Andy? No, Andy. I remember somebody down in the West Country. I used his nonsense commands with the artillery, a levy, a mediocre bow, a light horse, and a light foot. All unreliable general, all behind fortifications.
Proper Ottoman stuff, then. Yeah.
And then everything else was elite in the army. But yeah, that was interesting. We learned a few tricks and trades there as well.
So what were they, mate? That's what we're trying to find out. Not just I learned some tricks, let's move on. You've got to cough them up on this podcast.
I'm not telling you that. That's trade secret.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I learned playing against Dave, you got to check that he applies the rules correctly. So, because he thought that cataphracts and fields could move.
What?
They can't. No.
You can move. They thought they could move at a speed of 2, and they can't. You can only move at a speed of 1.
Right.
So.
Well, I was shifting 1 and blah blah blah. But I destroyed Andy's Thracians with my late Romans. That was quite.
You did, yeah. But I took 20 out of 23 off your army.
Yeah, that was surprising. I thought it was going quite well. And then I think I played Stan. With medieval.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was interesting again. That's the old medieval Spanish, my favourite. Blah blah blah. So
how have you found? The light horse was the other big kind of change. Have you started to use them, or have you started to design armies to mitigate their existence?
I've just got used to the zone of control, and it's no big deal.
Yeah.
I actually think it makes the game more interesting. It's it belongs a little bit, but it's quite good. This is a good one we discovered. This is on Monday night at the club. If you're fighting someone frontally, and that troop, the guys you're fighting get hit by your pike in the flank, in a field, or even on a.
I see. Yes.
Yeah. The pike are not. So
don't get a minus for the disorder. Yeah.
Plus the flank.
Yeah.
They could be fighting on top of a frigging mountain, and they don't have any factor. Defeating the flank.
They still count as 3.
They still count as full fat. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I guess otherwise it would get hideously complicated, wouldn't it, about what you count and what you don't?
True, but I do find that suddenly pike are actually better than the mountains than they were fighting on their own.
Well, yeah, but if they're there as an extra spare unit to hit someone in the flank in terrain which they can't really move in.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, if the pike is higher up on the hill, it just has to poke the sticks down a little bit, and they can do some damage. They don't have to do much.
Yeah, it could be like the Israeli tanks in the Golan Heights being able to depress their guns, and the T-62s not being able to, point up and get them. Yeah, that's the secret.
That was an interesting discovery. We thought that. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what I'm not clear about is if you've got cavalry charging into the flank of people, they don't get degraded for terrain. So if you've got cavalry charging through a field or something, they start off at a factor of 1 rather than -1.
They fight at full factor.
Yeah, just normal factor, normal base factor. No, it's an interesting catch.
Impact? No, they don't get impact.
No, they don't get impact. They don't get any of the bonuses at all.
Well, not if you're fighting as melee support. No, but so basically, as long as you can get the buggers in there, as long as they can reach.
Just get something good to do it. Better than crappy bowmen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
This means war.
I think who else going around the table? Peter, what about you? Have you managed to squeeze in any games at all over the last couple of weeks, or have you been?
Yeah, I had a couple of games against Dave Allen. We had a Pantheon Civil War. Quite amusing. Dave showed me in great detail about how you actually wrap up the line in the first game, which I then applied back to him. Yeah, it's with the new rules with ADLG4, where once you actually start getting into someone and getting into the side, it can really be messy. I mean, we were going back and forth because I'm still, getting my feet back under the table and getting used to the rules again after not playing for a while.
Playing properly, yeah.
And we actually found that the new rule set is really good in the pictures for explaining stuff. So there's less wiggle room, nice and clear. You know, we already know the intent. It's just reminding us because we've played in Europe a few times and played with Hervé himself as well. But I actually found it very useful because it was like, oh well, there it is. Whatever the reason it is there for, it's just here's the thing. Here's the one exception. Let's just crack on with it. And I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed it more when I won the second game, of course. Yes. But that's by the by.
So what if they were identical armies? What was there anything from the new rules that particularly came into play in the way that game played out?
I used a flying wing to better extent. So
a flying wing.
That from a Dark Death Star.
No, I basically, getting the medium cavalry because there's a lot less heavy cavalry impact bow. So having some cavalry and using the light cavalry to do the pinning and things like that, you can use them to a much better extent now. And it's definitely more rewarding to have better. So you can go two ways at the moment: either a really, really large army and not worry as much and just go forward, or you up your command pips and then you can actually have a bit more mixed troop types and take advantage of the differences. The differences actually make a little bit more of an edge, especially going back to getting around the edge and getting around to then close out the line, because that's when you can really start making some damage.
I suppose that's good if you're seeing that a big army is one way to go, or high command also has its own value, because I think we'd said before, kind of high command had sort of got a bit lost. People had worked out how to do things with 3 competence or 2 competence and ordinary and stuff like that, but having high command making a big difference is kind of an interesting development.
Yeah, especially if you've got a decent command, a few light troops, light horse, you can really start pinning down the enemy, and provided you can use it in an interesting way. Next thing you know, you've pinned down one of their commands. You can use your good troops to sort of punch through and start rolling up. You can really start racking up the points very quickly, whereas before you could actually slow them down and drag it out a bit more, especially with a whole line of impetuous, crappy foot, whatever, so the usual stuff. Some mediocre heavy infantry sort of thing. It just takes ages to wear it down. Now, the fact that you can get in at the edge and then you can have the impact going at the side, it really makes the difference. Plus, you actually want something that has got the additional points to actually do it when you get to the edge. Yeah. So you're not just trying to just get there with some light infantry for the overlap or whatever. So it reinforces that you want something coming around. So I can see using more mediocre medium horse coming in as a sort of actual reserve, which when you think about it is more realistically how they would actually be used.
Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed something interesting in my game against Dave, which is that now, if you pursue into the flank of somebody who's fighting to the front, that actually causes them to drop, which it didn't in version 3. And that helps to
speed things up as well.
Yeah.
And I think Pete mentioned the pictures in the rules. I think they're particularly good at explaining the issue over kinks lines.
Yeah. Yes, true. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that does come out quite clearly. You've got to be a sort of special kind of person not to understand how clear that is, haven't you? Which is nice to see. So, Simon, what about you? Have you managed to fit in any games of Renaissance or t'other one?
I'm laughing.
Sorry?
Have you managed to fit in any games of Renaissance or Ancients over the last couple of weeks?
Not over the last couple of weeks. What I've been trying to do is really update Renaissance to bring it in line with version 4 of the rules. So that's been quite a bit of fun. You'd think for effectively what is a supplement of 28 pages, how hard should it be? There's been some, as you were saying, there's a lot of nice subtleties in the way V4 has been streamlined and it flows. Just going back to how he's written that and just the minor tweaks and changes you need to bring Renaissance into compatibility with it has been quite fun. So
does that help you sort of spot what the changes are in Ancients in a strange way, or what are the significant ones?
It's been really good also to help read the rules clearly and then understand what they're saying to then get your head around it. Yeah,
because I think we were talking about this on WhatsApp kind of during the week, that some of the kind seeing new players kind of struggle with how the rules work. Version 4 seems to be pulling in a huge number of new people. It's just looking at the structure of the rules, it's just so different to Darker World. And or maybe it's, I don't know if it's Anglo-centric, or I don't know if it's just Hervé or whatever, but it's that whole thing about the way the rules are actually structured is, here's a list of general principles for the rules about movement or fighting or whatever. Then here is a list of possible things that can happen on table that are a bit weird. And then here is a list of effectively exceptions to the general rules that apply in those weird situations.
Yeah.
And it's just, it means you end up, it's not internally linguistically consistent, but it's like, here's what normally happens, but if this happens, something different happens.
Yeah.
And that's just what it is. It's not trying to create an overarching theory of everything. It's going this and exception. As long as you can cover off pretty much all the exceptions, it actually works really well as a structure, because there's no argument. It doesn't matter if something's not consistent with some big theory of everything, because you can just go, right, when this happens, bosh, sort it out. That's just fact.
And you can see some of the rules. There is the occasional rule that doesn't make historical sense or is a little bit weird. The idea of conforming. So if you're halfway into terrain and someone hits you, if you're, say, a cavalry and the guy you hit is medium infantry in a bit of terrain, you don't conform into the bad terrain because it affects you.
Yeah.
So the logic is in the active player has to conform. So it is a bit weird then the medium foot player gets pulled out. It's a bit of a clunky rule rather than historically accurate. But rather than having 10 different rules and paragraphs, comments and parentheses, it basically says the active player must conform. There you go. So rather than a whole series of paragraphs, just one simple line, 9 times out of 10 is really good. Every now and then you're going to get stuck. But you'll learn quickly.
I think what I've seen certainly online is there are people who are used to playing these sort of theory of everything rules who keep going, but why? And the answer is, well, Hervé said so.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, you get into this kind of loop of, but there's got to be a why. It should all fit together intellectually. It's like, no. In this situation, this is what happens. This is what the bloke said.
It's a game.
Yeah, it's an abstraction. It's all an abstraction anyway.
Yeah.
No matter how much you think it's.
I also think Hervé is really good at coming to people and asking them, saying, "What do you think?"
Yeah,
and taking it back. And I remember when we were in Rome. It was Sunday. We were all pretty knackered. We all sat around the table having lunch. All the English players, and Hervé made a point of coming over, sitting down with us on his own, and saying, "What do you think in the rules needs to be improved?" And I remember sitting there going, "Well, legionaries get a bit of a hard fun bite," and he's, it's fantastic to know that he sat there listening to that, and giving the rear support that big change, which has made legionaries work a little bit better.
And also they can move faster in the until they get. That alone will make life a lot more fun for heavy foot players.
Yeah. Well, actually, maybe that brings us on to some of my games.
About heavy foot moving faster. That's certainly a benefit. Historically, the Swiss pike blocks forward at a very fast rate.
Yeah, true. No, they did get quite quickly.
ADLG, it's 2-inch 2UD moves.
Because Fogg got around that. So in Fog Renaissance, the way they approached the Swiss is they made Swiss what they called determined foot. So they moved at medium foot speed. They fought as heavy foot. So it did allow you to get the Swiss tactic of we're all in a keel formation. We'll bring the fight to you. But the idea now, as you said, Tamsin, heavy foot can pretty much, with a decent commander, 6 UD wide, or straight up the table going, I'll bring the fight to you. It just means you can get into a national game, or as we discussed in a couple of other, when we've looked at a couple of games, once the battle has broken apart a bit and the lines have all broken apart, there's a chance then of heavy infantry chasing after things, or at least advancing towards baggage, where we all know that once the main line of your battle's broken apart, sometimes it's not even viable to go to the baggage because it's just going to take you forever.
Yeah. No, I must admit, my game, one of my 2 games in the last couple of weeks, I played. I drove up to Dave Allen's. I had to deliver some stuff to him, and we played a game in his garden. He makes a very good pizza. Actually, you should, if you do go, you should encourage him to fire up his pizza oven. But that's pretty niche. I don't think that too many of our listenership are going to be interested in that. But and he was using his, I think it's Pantheon or whatever army he's taking for this first competition coming up in a few weeks' time, hopefully.
Parthians, yeah, I played last week.
And I put I think it was Ptolemaic army down against him with 8 pikemen in the central command in 2 kind of blocks, and oh my god, they move like grease lightning. I think he chose to defend to get step terrain or something. So suddenly I was like, here's 8 pikemen. And he was like, oh my God, what did you do about that? And it just gave so much extra time on the rest of the flanks to really hurl that down someone's throat and just really take the initiative. And then I also had, in fact, no, the other weird thing about that, so I had a boot full of stuff of Clives that I'm kind of putting on eBay, and I'm selling to people and delivering to people. And on the way back down from Rugby, I stopped at not Toddington, Watford Gap Services, the classic motorway service station of, it was, I think it was the very first motorway service station, possibly, in Britain. And as I parked up, some bloke came up to me and went, "Oi, mate, I've got these televisions. Are you interested?" And I was like, "But God, it's not 1973, mate. It's like, God, nobody's done that in 30 years. Just people approaching you in motorway service stations offering to sell you knockoff tellies and ties and things like that." And then I kind of went, "Oh, actually, do you want to buy a couple of dozen Thracian Peltas in 15 mil?" And he looked at me, gone out and fucked off. It was amazing. So
maybe you just haven't looked dodgy enough more recently because you're normally in your work here or something.
Yeah, possibly that was it. But to be approached by someone in a motorway service station offering dodgy knockoff telly, you're just going, that stopped a long time ago, a long time ago.
You're just feeling annoyed that you feel out of the age group that you was going to be offering something more recreational.
Yes, that could probably be right. Yeah,
a bit like Townsend's tree flocking.
Yes, a bit of tree flocking or something like that. Bit of base text, different herbal mixes.
This means war.
And then I had a game online against Paolo from Italy, who is kind of looking seriously at ADLG, having been an MM player, and he's kind of he's a very, very good player, but he's getting to grips to it. And he made an interesting comment that I thought about and then thought about differently. He said, "Oh, there doesn't seem to be in the battle reports that there's much use of reserves in ADLG," and I was thinking about it and going, well, I think there's two things to that. If you keep a cavalry unit or something as reserve in DBM or DBMM terms, because we've only got 20 units as opposed to 70, that's sort of the same as having a block of 3, isn't it? Because there's 1/3 as many and it can still do something. But there is that fundamental thing about ADLG that, or maybe about DBM and MM and those sorts of games, that one of the clever tactics was to keep a mobile force that looked like a reserve, but it was actually you kept your best strike troops until your opponent had committed themselves, and then you drove them really quickly to the weak point of their line to get the best possible matchups and attack them there. So that mobile thing, it wasn't actually a reserve in historical terms. It was a game thing. It was like the Reigate Patrician Roman army that used to throw out a cloud of skirmishers. You didn't do the same thing in Fog. You throw out a cloud of skirmishers, ping away at the other army, and then drive your heavy cavalry to one part of the line and that's looking a bit weak and punch through. And it's a great game tactic, but that's just not actually the same as reserves. And it was just thinking how we all rationalize game things to try and pretend they're historical, when actually that was something that talking about, I was just thinking, no, that when we all used to do that was actually a game thing, and we convinced ourselves it was reserves, which was intriguing.
Definitely got some place now. I mean, to give away my list for York, I've got a couple of medium foot swordsmen, mediocre at 4 points, and they just sit behind the line. And if you drive in your cataphracts to fight against Thracian swordsmen, you chase up with a medium swordsman to protect their flank, and that operates as a reserve. That's really good.
I think, in a game that's only going to last 6 or 7 turns, there's a limited opportunity to move a reserve up anyway. But in ADLG, it's much more important to have a plan that you execute rigorously.
Yeah,
you can't wait for the opponent to commit themselves and then decide your own deployment and plan. It just doesn't work.
I think it's going to be interesting when people are doing, because Dave Allen and I were trying a couple of things. When you do that line wrap, it's so tempting to start diving in with the pursuit, as Tasman was saying, and everything else, that having that reserve would actually put that threat down and actually make them almost like stutter, so it gives them the chance for yours to get round. So if they don't have it, then you can then exploit that. So it's almost like that rock, paper, scissors thing. I don't know. I'm looking forward to playing a couple of things and trying out a few ideas, but it just puts another little dynamic. It doesn't make it as quite as linear.
Yeah, but you would now. There's probably more case to have a reserve because flank attacks are structurally more effective. So you need to do more to stop them. You can't. And
there's different concepts of a reserve. There's like the army reserve, which is what you were talking about. Is you've got your strike force at the back. That's reserve.
Yeah.
Do a bit of playing and then you drive your reserve somewhere. Yeah. But just local reserves of having 1 or 2 units behind your main battle force to cover a gap or to cover the flank is probably a useful thing. Something that I do. So there's not an army-wide reserve.
But is that army reserve that waits until the opponent's committed and then chooses where it's going to go? Is that even a valid ancients thing, or is
probably for some? For Genghis, probably was.
Yeah.
I think for the Egyptians, I think they usually
wouldn't they have gone like side to side like that with the with the city walking thing? They can only go left to right. They couldn't go forwards and things.
Or is that left to right?
Yeah, or we're talking about the Bangles soon if we're not careful.
And to be fair with ADO, like when I said for Genghis, it probably is, and for some sort of armies, you probably can do that. Yeah, it's like Genghis can sit back with 3 or 4 of his best cavalry, sort of like pull the enemy.
But I'm not sure, because I wonder if with ADLG, because of the table size and how quickly the opponent gets across the table, you have to have decided where you're going to start. You can move them from A to B, but you've got to have started doing that in turn 1. You can't wait until turn 3 to see where they're going to go.
Yeah.
I think with some artists like Genghis, as a strategist with some heavy cavalry, you can sort of like go a foot a turn. So I think, especially if defending in the step, I think you can sort of like put your skirmishers out.
Yeah.
See what the enemy does and then react to it, which for some armies I think is reasonable.
I think there's a place. I mean, if you've got high command value and you put down a micro command of 3 or 4 units, and then if you deploy slightly back across the table and put enough light horse or light foot at the front, you can turn around and spin a command from one side of the table to the other side of the table and entirely change your command. I think, as Tim was saying earlier, it's going to be really interesting about some armies are going to be really large.
You could do it. It's just almost like running out of time there, Dave. I totally agree. You can do it. It's just I like to win, so I could do it. But then, am I going to get enough points?
And I think we're arguing tiny degrees here. I think Adam, you're saying you can see where the army's going, and then you do it. But I think my point would be, you've kind of got to have looked at their deployment and make that decision. Whereas in DBM, you could wait a couple of turns, but this you've got to go, that's their deployment. I'm going to start moving these buggers over here. Otherwise, they will have pushed you off table. Very, very, particularly with the new three moves. So it's a slightly different. It's the same thing, but you just got to do it sooner and faster and harder. Really,
that's the Byzantine trick. You put down a micro command of one general included, ordinary, who's really good, a couple of lesser heavy cavalry and a light horse. Stick them a third away across the table. Somebody puts down a load of troops against them, and then that command just turns around, runs straight around the other side of the table to reinforce another part.
And I also suppose it's a game that's designed to last 2.5 hours rather than 3.5, 4. So everything's going to be over that much quicker anyway.
That much quicker. You've got to be in there doing it. Good. Okay.
I could pinch Tim's trick here and say, well, that keys us up completely for a discussion next week of the runners and riders for York.
Brilliant. Well, Dave, I think that teases up perfectly next week for a discussion of the runners and riders for York. Let's come back to that in a couple of weeks. Brilliant. This is great. Soon I won't even need to turn up for this one. This will be grand. So yes, on that note, I think we can wrap up the gaming section for sure.
Oh, we don't get to talk about mine then.
Okay, no, I'm sure yours was interesting, Adam. But look, if you want to force your way in and just hog the limelight, tell us what happened, Adam. Did you win? Is that why you want to talk about it?
Well, we'll take that as a given.
Yeah, of course.
But on a slightly more sort of like interesting side, I used Dacians against Romans, and so I used the sort of like massive medium foot sword, which is now an even bigger mass because they're so much cheaper. Yeah, and that style of army is I think it's going to be interesting to play without being hugely successful because. The whole what that army can do is fight wider than everybody else, more or less. So you do get to push past flanks and sort of like see if you can go into people's flanks and then do what Peter was talking about. But they're little enough that sometimes people are just going to go straight through your middle, and your media foot are going to evaporate. So it was a fun game, and I think they're going to be fun to use. But I don't think they're sort of going to be an all-conquering army, which is all right.
So did you kind of get the impression it's a kind of a ta-da, I've caught you out, but you won't fall for that again?
No.
Sort of trick, or no?
Well, no, and it's like where the game is can the Dacians push past, because you've got troops everywhere all along the line. Yeah. Can you push past where the enemy are weak or aren't and get into the flank of their best troops quicker than their best troops can just go straight over what they're fighting? Yeah. So in the game I had Roman legionaries against my elite Falksmen. And legionaries chopped them up and they all just kind of disappeared. But in other parts of the table, I'd managed to sort of like get medium foot into flanks and I rolled up the line, so I won because it's a big army. It takes a lot to take it down. So the Romans just collapse faster.
So would you say, that Romans feel like Romans and Dacians feel like Dacians then?
I think the Romans use historical Roman tactics. So they feel very much like Romans, and Dacians feel like, or the medium play styles, does feel like a huge army of screaming buggers that rush forward quite quickly, which is fun. Yeah,
and you notice that was sort of almost more so than in the previous version, just because you get more of the buggers these days now.
Well, I noticed it for two reasons. Firstly, you get more of the buggers, and secondly, I never used the army in the previous version. So
right, okay. So it's a different sort of feel then. Fantastic. Okay then. Well, look, in case I've not missed anyone else, have I? There's not anybody else lurking here. Tamsin, you've managed to squeeze in any games? Not this couple of weeks.
I've got a couple of games booked over the next few weeks, but
okay,
I haven't played any yet.
Right, so we would no doubt see you down the club then. So I think that wraps up the what have you played and what's our kind of vibe on V3 at the moment. That's pretty cool. Good.
Or even V4.
Or V4, yes, minor detail. V4, yes. Time is moving on, and time does carry on moving on as we inevitably hit French techno time.
Question, comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond. Question, la légende le dit. Question, elle dit aussi. Question, c'est une maladie. Question.
Ah, Monsieur Andy, comment ça va? Comment ça va, le cuisine or le cuisinière or something, wherever you are sat at the moment. Can you Can you start by reminding us what happened 2 weeks ago? Because I think we've all been out in the sun since then.
Yes, well, 2 weeks ago, it was all about Italian metal after the Eurovision.
It was, yes. Yes, Eurovision was topical 2 weeks ago.
It was, that's right, yeah. Yep. So the first question was about the first warship ever to be sunk by guided missile was a World War II Italian battleship attacked by the Luftwaffe. And what was its name?
Was it the Roma?
Yes.
Yeah, but actually, it was the first Italian warship sunk by a guided missile. HMS Egret was sunk by a guided missile about 2 weeks before.
Right. I stand corrected. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if only we'd known that, we could have won the Eurovision Song Contest. My God.
Yeah. Nul point for me by the sound of it. Right.
Yeah.
Question 2. When the Italian army entered World War II in June 1940, its most numerous armoured vehicle was the L3 tank. What was the main armament of this tank?
Is that the L333 or the L335?
Bamboo.
It was machine guns, but
I would have thought, looking at those tankettes, I would have thought its main armament was a sense of disbelief that people could actually fit inside it. Really, unless did they actually hire really teeny tiny people, or is it just a weird thing about 15 mil scale tanks just not looking right?
The Romans.
But every country's tankers tend to be on the short side.
Well,
submariners then, no?
I remember when we did Spanish Civil War, what Tim was going on about, because we got some Italian of these like teeny tiny tanks out, and someone was saying, "Oh, they got to be 10 mil tanks. They can't be 15 mil. They really are that dinky."
Yeah, people must have been in them kind of like lying down, like those people riding those funny cycles that always get world records for keeping going. For
so they were armed with 2 8mm machine guns. In other words, less firepower than a fighter aeroplane.
Yeah, 33 was a single 6.5 mil.
Well, the L3.
Well, of course you'd have 6.5, wouldn't you? Yes. Why would you go for anything sensible? Yes. Yeah.
And the third one was the Roman Navy developed a device called a corvus, a rotating boarding bridge with an iron spike to affix it to an enemy's ship's deck, which they fitted to their warships in the First Punic War. Notwithstanding its effectiveness, what caused the Romans to scrap the use of the corvus?
They capsized.
They capsized in sort of choppy water.
Yeah, there was a massive storm and about 300 of them sank.
Yeah.
300 of them?
Bloody effective in the First War.
Yeah. They actually lost about 10,000 men in this storm. And after that, they thought, better not. Right, so...
The Romans had no navy. And when they captured a Carthaginian ship, they dismantled it and found the Carthaginians put it together like an airfix kit. It had little numbers on it, how to put the ship together.
Oh, right, not with that special glue, no?
Exactly.
Yeah, it was all welded together. It was made out of plastic. So I think, talking plastic, that brings us close to, I think, the Belgian pop star, Plastic Bertrand, which brings us yet again to a moment of French techno. Andy, you're back with some new questions after that French incident. What theme which will not be topical in 2 weeks from now are we going to pretend is topical now and use as the theme for this week's quiz?
Well, last weekend was D-Day, so this is all about amphibious invasions.
That's good. That means it's already not topical by the time we record this. And put
you
it out.
try
By
doing
the time
these
we get the
quizzes and
answers,
see how
people will have
topical you can
completely
make it.
forgotten about it. Good.
Yeah,
that's all good. That's our good standard.
Right. Okay. Right. In the 1880s, what did German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck say he would do if the British invaded the German coast of Heligoland?
Right.
Hey.
Right.
Yep.
Question 2. What natural phenomenon made the amphibious landings at Incheon in Korea in 1950 particularly hazardous?
Right. Okay.
And question 3. Which country was invaded by accident by a Royal Marine Amphibious Force in the year 2002?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Okay, that's another tasty one. Well, look, that's got us a range of fascinating and interesting questions. So we will all look forward with bated breath to returning in 2 weeks. But meanwhile, let's roll le techno.
Question, comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond. Question, la légende le dit. Question, elle dit
So we're into the final home straight then now, and it's just time for a quick wrap up of what you got coming in the next 2 weeks before we reconvene on the eve. Possibly will we be after Liberation Day or whatever it's called in 2 weeks' time, 9th plus 14. We will be after the 21st, won't we? We'll know what's happening, whether we're allowed out or not. But let's just go around and say what's on the decks for painting, buying, playing in the next couple of weeks. And Dave, let's start with you. What have you got lined up? Another 1,000 games?
I'm not doing any painting, but I think I'm considering doing a YouTube masterclass on how to deal with kink lines.
Right. Yes. No, that'd be good. That would be popular. Yep. If you need someone to come and shout at you and punch you in the face, I'll just to do the action sequences, I'll be happy to cycle up and join in on that one. Right. But other than that, what's your plan? Just more gaming? Are you going to keep with using the York Army or try some different stuff?
You know what? After a year of doing bloody nothing work-wise, I've got so much work on. I'm going to do nothing but work for it until we go to
York. Excellent. Good.
I'm really looking forward to York. York's going to be fantastic. It's going to be so good pushing toy soldiers around, seeing people, drinking lots of beer in York, getting shit-faced and showing up for Monday morning back at work looking rubbish.
Yeah, with your trophy, no doubt. So Adam, what maybe. Adam, what about you? Are you getting more big Dacian action out in the next couple of weeks, or are you going to become a Lord of the Rings fanatic? You're going to reread the books?
I reread them on a semi-regular basis, but I've got a game on tomorrow, which I'm looking forward to, and I'm going to try and get one game a weekend if I can. But I seem to be spending most of my time driving my children around most of southern England to go to various cricket matches they're playing in, which is somewhat time consuming. So as the summer goes on, I think painting and playing toy soldiers is going to be taking a bit of a background. But I've also got to give serious thought about the competition in Bournemouth and sort of like sorting out who's doing what. And so I should be emailing people in the next few days about that.
Okay, good. Well, it'd be good to know about that thing, because I think we've all entered probably or did something like that. Tamsin, what about you? Are you is this kind of kitchen based, garden based, food based plans for the next few weeks or anything?
More blender.
Probably not blending.
Right.
Maybe some more. I've blended a lot of foam.
Right. Okay. Yes, I've blended a lot of foam.
Probably not. So I might do some more a few more experiments getting with the current foliage, but mostly it's going to be working on the jungle terrain. Okay.
So you'll be next time we see you on.
So I should have test pieces done in the next few days and see how they work.
How a coffee machine.
Got various bits of MDF coming in. Sort of basic.
You're not writing a book on terrain recipes, are you?
Huh?
Yeah. You're not going to have to cook one up in the microwave, are you?
1001 uses of a coffee machine in Wargames.
Yes, indeed. That would grind it too fine.
Oh!
Right. What, was there a joke there? Did I make a joke? No. Okay. All right, Peter. What about you? Are you going to buy something, play something?
I'm going to try and play some games. I think I might have to book some time off, but I fancy getting in and trying some games. I've got some stuff to paint up when I break out some time, because I've cleaned off some metal for filling off some Persians and some more Parthians and a couple of others. So various sort of like blues and golds and things. So there's a couple of ones I want to get to and paint up and sort out. It's just need to carve out some time.
Okay. Simon, what about you? Are you still working through Renaissance and trying to port that over, or are you going to manage to fit in some games? Or
I've got a game this week which I'm looking forward to. So playing Mr. Dave Allen. I think it'll be the first time in 2 years we've had a game.
Wow.
So that'll be good fun. And on the painting table, I seem to have received a very large shipment from.
Oh, indeed, yes, that's
Clive.
true.
So I said I wouldn't do it, but then some miniatures were found, and so I'm now looking at possibly doing some 25mm ADLG Renaissance because he had some great figures there.
Yeah.
And I picked up a whole bunch of 7 Years' War random guys. Some were allegedly Swedes. A whole bunch of guys with tricorns in more 15mm rather than my Lancashire 15.
Is that Dixon Army?
Dixon Army. So I'm going to try to paint them up very Swedish with yellow uniforms and lots of Swedish heavy metal band banners and things like that. Just have a bit of fun.
Okay. All right, Andy. What about you? Are you going to do another couple of 10mm figures next fortnight?
I'm actually thinking of doing the 15mm Janissaries I bought from the museum and the City Rabble to sort of and that once I've done that, I'll have a complete Ottoman Renaissance army. So that once I finish this temple thing, which is going quite well at the moment, then that will be my next project. I'm not sure how far I'll get with in the next couple of weeks, but I've got the figures out, so that's a step in the right direction. And I've got more enthusiasm for painting that than 10mm World War II figures, because I kind of got to the end of all the useful bits and I had other figures left over, and I thought, can I be asked to paint these? And it was more of a chore. So by just chucking them away to one side, it kind of freed me up psychologically. That's it. Got a couple of games. I've got games every Monday. I'm playing Tamsin in 2 weeks' time, and I'm playing other people on other Mondays, trying to get a bit of practice in with an idea of how to configure my Thracian army for Bournemouth. One or two other bits, and that's it, basically.
Okay, all right. Well, I think my plan is to kind of start coming down the club. I think it will be. No, is it this Thursday? I think, which is possibly tomorrow. I think I'm then 2 weeks after vaccine 2, which is kind of the line I've kind of gone to say, yeah, solid, let's start doing stuff again. And so I've got to book up a load of games and start planning to come down the club. I've put a whole enormous, say, 50 plus things on eBay at the moment. So if you're interested in particularly Flames of War, a few Ancients things, or Dystopian Wars, if you've got any idea what that is, please don't read my descriptions, and look for the Lithuanian, the _Lithuanian, as a seller on eBay, because there's a load of Clive stuff there. I'm going to leave that to filter through and sell, because my gaming room is full of taped up boxes and packaging tape, so that's got to clear out a bit. And I'm doing a bit of rebasing. I've got to put some matte varnish on things, and I've got to get some Spaniards undercoated as well, 15mm Spaniards, to start the next sort of mini little project, which should be fun. And but yeah, definitely get some games. And I just want to try not just practicing for York. I want to try getting some very different armies, and it's just maybe there's even a job of working out what armies I've redone and created during lockdown and never really got out, and just have a list of which ones I want to rock up with, which I think sadly might actually have the Achaemenid Persians fairly high at the top, both early and late versions, but I won't admit that. And I think, yeah, possibly, maybe we're out of time, and I should cut this podcast short just before I actually cough that one up. So once again, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for listening, those of you who've managed to survive it. Another reasonable length episode. We've not gone too mad, and we've covered some interesting stuff this week. So this one probably, I think, comes out on a Saturday, as I think I'm going to struggle to get it done on Thursday, Friday, and edited and out. But see you all in a fortnight's time. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. I thought that one was a good one though, Tim, doing the Persians.
But we've got to, even if it's not, we've got to bang one in, because people think that they're funnier than they are. I had 2 people contact me about those match reports I banged out this week that were all a bit like, oh, I can't be fucking asked, I can't know what's happening. And both of them pointed out things in it that they thought I'd done deliberately, they thought were really funny, that were just I didn't even know. It's like, oh, that's odd.
Were they your Tommy Cooper moments?
It was all sorts. It could have been anything. No, I think he did deliberately.
This means war.